This is 1 year of when Backstage Community Sessions started. And if you're joining the contributors tags for the first time, this is the place where we go deeper into the hood of Backstage, code library and look, what are the goodies we have, some demos and some talks on what's new. So yeah, today's agenda is a bit short, but I'm hoping it'll be all right. So we have some things to announce, but after that we have the TechDocs core team talking a bit about the TechDocs add-on framework. If you're catching up on RFCs, that's a new one. And then we have some Q&As in the issue that we didn't go through the last time, but also things that you would like to ask on Zoom. And then I just thought of like, what is one utility API that I love? And then I'll do a demo of something that I like. So yeah, stay tuned. But first of all, as this is the 1 year anniversary, we have prepared a small video because we love creating videos. It has got sound and stuff, so enjoy. This is why we do it. This is the reason we want to see faces behind, all the GitHub usernames and the GitHub profile picture with dots and, stuff. So yeah, thanks again for meeting. On announcements, as some of you might know, we like to do a contributor spotlight in Backstage Community Sessions. And we have been doing it for a long time. And it was always, we have so many contributors in the community, and whom to pick was always a challenge. So we decided to make the process, of nomination a bit fair and open up for the community. So I'm pasting a link in the chat. Thanks, Suzanne. You can now nominate Backstage contributors for a spotlight, and you can nominate yourself. So fill some details. If you know someone who is doing amazing and has helped you a lot, maybe a new plugin that you use inside your company, or some of your coworkers as well. So feel free to nominate, and we'll celebrate, and we'll make sure we send swag to them. So that's it. That was the announcement. For the next bit, it's something really exciting in the TechDocs world. I myself have worked on TechDocs, and I love how Spotify uses TechDocs and the bits and pieces of functionality that just makes documentation experiences slightly enhanced. So without further ado, I would like to invite Eric to talk a bit about TechDocs add-on framework.
Thanks, Himanshu. Hey, everyone. Again, it's been a while from me. Let me share my screen real quick. I don't have really a whole lot to share, but I guess I'll give you some background on what we're trying to do with this add-on framework, what it's trying to solve, and sort of what we would love from you as the community in terms of like feedback on what we're looking at doing. Stepping back a little bit, everyone hopefully is familiar with TechDocs. It's like the centralized place where all of the documentation for everything in your software ecosystem lives. It solves a lot of problems that all organizations have, putting all of that documentation in one place that's discoverable, searchable, etc. Super useful. What we at Spotify discovered is that while that is a huge hurdle to overcome in getting an organization to be more focused on documentation and empowering developers to do that alongside the work that they normally do in Codeland, stuff like that. Encouraging a culture of documentation is much harder and may, in fact, require tweaks to a documentation experience that might vary from organization to organization. This is sort of the vanilla TechDocs experience that we have now. And this is an experience that we have been iterating on internally at Spotify since the beginning of TechDocs, but in particular over the course of the past couple of quarters on top of open source TechDocs, where we can augment the default TechDocs experience with other features to encourage more collaboration, encourage more quality in documentation, and things of that nature. The way that we've envisioned this framework to do this is sort of thinking of it in terms of render time augmentation versus build time augmentation that you might see in like an MKDocs plugin, as well as sort of region-based augmentation and virtual augmentation. Here you can see clearly we have like a subheader type region where we can throw some components like a leave feedback thing here, or maybe some sort of accessibility style improvements that different users might want to choose to configure differently. We have sort of a sidebar region over here where we can throw some additional information, documentation that might be useful, depending on the context of what piece of documentation you're looking for, as well as like straight up in the header, like you want to trust that the documentation is recent and that it's written by people you trust, for example. On the virtual side of things, I'm sure everyone's sort of seen this from demos in the past, but you might want to make it easy for people to report issues with documentation so they get solved more quickly. Or sort of on the more dynamic render time side of things, you might want people to actually be able to reference documentation from other TechDocs sites and include them inline here. These are what we've built internally at Spotify to solve some of the documentation culture problems that we've encountered. And we intend to open source some, if not all of these eventually. But more importantly, we built this as a framework so that you, the community, can also add your augmentations and share it with the rest of the community so that people can pick and choose what's important for their organization. Now, we have this RFC that's available over here. Hopefully somebody can link it in the chat while I'm talking to an empty void. It goes through some of the technical details of what we're doing. There are some open questions. I guess what we want to hear from you, the community, is what types of add-ons do you envision for your organization? And does the proposal suit what you might want to build? So I think that's all the time that I'm going to take for now. Thanks for listening. Please check out the RFC, read through, comment, imagine, and we'll collaborate there.
So amazing. Thanks, Eric, for the demo and a call out to the RFC. It's really cool. Love TechDocs, been a fan. So hope you could try this and make sure it can happen. Like search, it also seems like there can be a community of things on top of a plugin, and it's a trend that I'm seeing. So search has a bunch of collators where you can pull stuff from different places, and TechDocs now has add-ons. Scaffolder has its own templating engines. So it's great to see that Backstage plugins have plugins. That's something I found a bit funny. Awesome. If you have any question for Eric and the whole TechDocs team, anything related to the add-ons framework, leave it in the chat. We can talk about it. But next, I would like to do a demo of one of one of the core utilities inside Backstage, and they are called quite straightforward URL readers. Let me share my screen because I have 4 slides to present. I'm going to share my entire desktop. And now I'm speaking to a void because all of you disappeared. But hope you can see my screen. So this is for all the Backstage plugin developers out there. If you're creating plugins and if you feel like your plugin needs to read stuff from external locations, this is for you. Some use cases that this API or core utility solves. So some things that are happening right now. Software catalog needs to read catalog info YAML files from different services. This need in order to track their ownership and everything. Software templates or the scaffolder plugin needs to read all this template skeleton files for creating new services for you. TechDocs needs to download all the markdown files that you have inside your project in order to generate the documentation site, and so on. So all these plugins heavily depend on reading files and processing them. And it happens a lot. So every time you visit a TechDocs site, it needs to make sure you're watching or you're reading the latest documentation. So it will try to fetch all those files and regenerate sites if it's outdated. So in the background, all of these plugins use something called URL reader to make it happen. And the benefits of using URL reader over, you can imagine writing something custom to directly call APIs is the authentication is taken care of. So whether you're reading from a public URL or a private URL, if your Backstage instance has correct integrations config, the URL reader will take care of reaching out to that place and finding the right token to make the right API calls. As you can imagine, Backstage has to support a lot of external platforms. So these files could be anywhere from GitHub, GHE, GitLab, hosted GitLab, Bitbucket, hosted Bitbucket. I'll bore myself just counting on all the platforms that we need to support, GCS, S3, and so on. And if you're creating a plugin, and if you have to support end platforms all the time, that's not good. So all you do is just make sure you use URL reader, and that just takes care of all the abstraction for you. And one additional perk is that even if you're directly using the GitHub token and making those calls, URL reader if you have GitHub app set up, and I'll make sure to paste a link of documentation in the chat. But if you have set up a GitHub app, it makes sure to refresh the tokens in order for, so that you don't hit the rate limit. So if you can imagine, if you have thousands of engineers visiting TechDocs pages, you would quickly run out of API limit if you're reading from GitHub and so on. Would like to go deeper under the hood. So this is what the interface of your reader looks like. There are 3 main methods. The first is read or read URL. Both are the same. One is being deprecated. So this is just for plainly reading a file. The second is read tree. This is for reading a tree or like a folder or a directory somewhere inside a repository. And the last bit is search, which I think is extremely powerful. So you can do things like, give me all catalog info YAMLs in this repository, and then boom, it happens, and we'll show you everything live. So this is the API interface of a URL reader, and I would like to give a demo because nothing is more challenging or fun than doing live coding. But now this time I have written all the pieces of code in comments so I won't get stuck. And how do I move this Zoom thingy? Oh yeah, I can do this. All right. As I said, this is only useful for plugin developers, and especially if your plugin is a backend. So I have created a plugin inside my Backstage instance using yarn Backstage CLI create. Increase the font. Yarn Backstage CLI create, and I chose a backend plugin, and it's here. Called demo 23 Feb backend. I wish it was on 22 Feb, then I would have called it Tuesday or something, but it's fine. So yeah, I chose a backend plugin, and I have everything set up. Sorry, I'm going to be jumping around a bit, but the main thing that I want to highlight here is that when you set up your plugin, when you wire your plugin, you might have noticed that you have to create a file for your plugin inside backend source plugins. And this is typically the place where you pass things from the Backstage backend core to your plugins, all the things that your plugin would want to use. So, and typically that's the create router function. If you've noticed, there's something called plugin environment, which you have access to here. And if you go look inside this thing, there's a lot of things here. And I always jump out of joy just looking at all these goodies that a plugin developer would want to use. There are things for, like, if you want to manage cache, don't worry, we have got you covered. If you want access to database, don't worry, we have got you covered. Discover other backends and other plugins. And logging, permits, this is new, backend to backend authentication. And this is the thing we are interested in, reader. So this is an instance of URL reader. We have passed that reader to our plugin using its create router. And if I open it, as you can see, I'm deconstructing it here. So now I have access to the URL reader instance inside my plugin. And since Backstage backend likes to spit out a lot of logs, we're going to use a phrase called hello goats. It's a bit personal, but just random thing. So whenever you see hello goats, just know that this is coming from our plugin. And let's just give it a time to start. All right, there it is. So the first thing, reading a file simply. So you would do reader.read or read URL, give it a file location. And the interesting thing is that this URL doesn't need to be a API URL. It can, let me bring a window here. You can just directly copy paste the URL whenever you're viewing the file in your browser. So I'm a bit distracted by Zoom thing here. I'm going to move this. So just copy this URL and just pass it on to reader.read. And then in the response, you should get the file content. And let's test it out. Hello, code. Nobody asked me why I'm using this. There we go. So wait, this is the file that we need. So you can, simple enough, you can read a file directly from your reader. But what's the fun? I can just visit this in incognito and I can still view it, like, what have you done here? So let me show an example of reading a location which is behind an authentication wall. So this is a private repository that I have created using scaffolder, of course. And as you can see, this is a private repository. I have set up integrations correctly, and I hope I get to see this test 23 Feb thing inside my logs. The backend has restarted, but as it's yelling to me, you need to restart the application. So I will oblige. I'm on the main Backstage mono repo. So there's lots of plugins in here. So apologies if build time is low, but there it is. So yes, it works behind authentication and private repositories as well. So that's it, simple enough, simple reading a file. But the power comes, and this is a bit I love a lot, is when you have to read an entire repository or a subdirectory, which has lots of files. So I'll give you an actual use case. So if you go to demo.backstage.io, and if you go to docs, and if you try to view the Backstage documentation, this is everything that's inside this docs folder inside Backstage repository. So the TechDocs plugin needs to find all the markdown files inside this repository, and it doesn't care what plugins you have and what packages you have. So as you can imagine, I'll give it a guess. If I download the entire repository, what do you think the file size is going to be? 50 MB, 100 MB, 500 MB, 50 GB? Just make a guess and I'll give the right answer later on. But it saves, your leader saves a lot of time if you can just download the docs folder. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to read. Oh, I have code written. So sorry, I'm just trying to speed things up and not get stuck into things that could have been avoided. But reader.read tree, file location to the directory docs. It's going to give me something called e-tag. If you know about this, if you don't know about this, don't worry, I'll talk more about this. But I'm going to extract all of it inside a directory. And I don't know what's happening, but let's run. Ignore search errors, but there it is. Extract a directory. This is it. If I just list all the files we have in there, you can find we have everything that's inside docs. Example, readme, FAQ, and such. This e-tag is a unique identifier for the uniqueness of the docs docs directory. So if anything inside docs changes, this e-tag will change. But if the e-tag remains the same, we can be sure that nothing has changed inside docs. So just a hash, if you will. And how is this used? This is used so that you don't download the folder again and again and just continue building the site if you don't have to. So it's used for making sure you have cache and you can check if your cache is valid or not. And this is a code sample for that. The API interface is a bit interesting. Not my most favorite, but that's the standard in HTTP requests as well, because e-tags are common there. If you call read tree and if you pass the e-tag that you have, let me just copy the latest e-tag because we have so much activity on Backstage, things change so frequently. But there we go. Now we have the e-tag we got. We are going to pass it in the read tree. And if the method throws a not modified error, which comes from Backstage errors library, which I can't seem to locate. This is interesting. We're going to log that the cache is valid. And let's run. Logoots, the cache is valid. So there it is. So this is good. YAL readers has good support for caches, and you don't need to keep downloading things again and again. The last bit, I promise, is search, and this might be interesting to some of you folks. It's that, so I want to find all the template.yaml files inside Backstage repository. And the way I do it is by using this glob pattern. So **, which means I don't care what level deep the file exists. just give me this file. And there's a bunch of things you can do here, like star here, star there. I guess Freben would have more things to say because he wrote this thing, but it's great. Let's find that out. So reader.search, and I'm going to print all the files that exist. So files.length in the response. And for each file, I'm going to log its URL. Make sure I have hello goats here because I want to find it out. And let's load. There it is. So we have 4 template.yaml files in the project, and these are the links. So that's it. That's my demo. So URL Reader is powerful. It integrates to a bunch of platforms as GitHub, GitLab, and such. Keep adding integrations because not a lot of them were written by the core team. A lot of them are contributed by the community. So this is amazing. If you feel like there's this location where plugin developers need to read files from, please add it. There's a documentation where you can learn how to do that. It's inside plugins, URL Reader. So you can learn how to write a new URL reader if you're interested. That's it. Awesome. So let me take my demo hat off and take my host hat on. Do we have any questions in the chat? And I would need someone's help here because otherwise I'm going to.
Yes, so somebody was asking, you wouldn't imagine this, but somebody was asking about the goats.
It's the name of the team I belong to inside Spotify. So that's what we like to do. We have funny names inside Spotify. Thanks, Susan. All right, there's some guesses. 1 terabyte. No, I think last I remember, I think the zip file is. So if you do git clone, it's like 500 MBs, but the zip file is much shorter. But that's the guess. 10 GB. Oh no. Maybe the node modules file is, but we don't commit it. So.
There's a question if the search clubbing works in an Azure DevOps repo.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I responded to it in line as well. That I'll have to double check honestly whether it does it right now. It may be that some providers don't support all of them, or may not support all of them effectively or efficiently rather. Depends on the underlying capabilities of the APIs and so on. If they don't have a fitting search API that we can leverage, then of course we may try to find other ways of doing it, like using read tree, which might be a lot faster sometimes to just download the required sort of folder and filtering out parts of it and making that the search result instead. But yeah, I'll have to double check offline if it does it well and so on.
Sure, I was just looking at the Azure tests, and I do see a glob pattern in the test, so maybe it does. But yeah, if it doesn't, then good first issue.
And a question if we can add this video to the documentation.
Indeed, we're going to crop this, put it on Backstage YouTube channel, and then add it to the docs. So that's the goal. What else do we have? Any push model for YAML data to complement the pull location model? I guess this is the age-old question about webhooks inside Backstage.
Yeah, I guess it is, right? If I understand the question correctly, it's about wanting essentially to be able to use HTTP post or similar, sort of force data into the catalog instead of it asking for data, right? I'll continue on that line. Yeah, so we are not looking to build that ourselves, but it's certainly possible. It's been asked a lot of times, and you can make your own entity provider that has its own storage that you sort of post to, and then it just forces that directly into the catalog. So the APIs are there, the sort of capabilities are there. We probably won't want to offer that out of the box. That's been our stance so far, at least, because it has some drawbacks. One of the things that we like about the pull model here is that we can leverage the permissions control, that comes with a Git provider, where you can have, you can control who gets to push what. There's sort of a rights model underpinning and everything. There are review flows, there's traceability, there's it brings with it a whole slew of additional bonuses. So we sort of want to encourage that model. But I'm sure someone has already built their own provider for this kind of use case. It might be useful for limited things. For example, if you limit who is permitted to push to it, maybe just some special service has the network capability of even reaching that endpoint and so on. So sure, it might be a viable use case, but we don't have it out of the box.
Thanks, Ruben. So we have a couple of questions in the agenda issue, and I would like to go over them before we cover everything in Zoom. So one is from Satish. If you're here, feel free to open your microphone and video as well, if you'd like. But you asked about, we'd like to know how we can maintain users and group on Backstage. So are you around, Satish? I did see your name in the chat, but if you'd like to ask it yourself, it's okay. But even though I'll read the question for you if you're not around. All good. So Satish asks, we would like to know how we can maintain users and groups on Backstage instead of manually creating those kinds of YAMLs. Is there any support for G Suite org Google Groups in Gesture?
Yeah, so that's should I take that one as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most orgs will choose not to use YAML files for that. Most commonly, you want to ingest that from an authoritative source of some sort, like from Workday or LDAP or so. We have a couple of such ingesters built in to the product, not specifically for G Suite, I think, though. So it might be something that could be worth contributing, or asking the community if someone has something that they have built and want to contribute. But certainly, users and groups management is typically not done through YAML files, unless you are in such an org that is maybe early on your trajectory and don't yet have a good authority to lean on. Maybe you haven't formed your org structure much yet, and so on. And then you can at least get started with the YAML files, and then migrate to something, more enterprisey later if you get it up and running.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
We do have ingesters for inputting teams and users from things like GitHub. Isn't that correct? So we have GitHub org processors and such. So there is a place where you can add custom processors or ingesters, sorry. So this looks like a good candidate because Google Groups are popular and you do already have teams in there. So it'd be good. Awesome. Thanks, Ruben. The next one is from Taras. Are you around, Taras?
I sure am.
Hey, good to see you. So would you like to ask the question yourself?
Sure. I was curious if there are any public repositories of Backstage instances aside from the demo app.
The demo app is what we know of. Oh, this one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's the demo app, and this is silvercrate.io. Awesome. And Silver Cradio.io, is that available on GitHub?
Are you around? If I'm pronouncing your name right, Glow Scott.
Hey, yeah, I only know of that one from a community session a couple of weeks ago. So I know Kira Tech did a demo on that one.
Okay,
Awesome, thanks.
cool. Thank you very much.
I can
Just
create
out
an
of
account.
curiosity, why your question? What are you looking for?
We work for the front side has one instance of Backstage that we're standing up. So our goal is to create a reference that has actually production data in it, so that people could look at like what a realistic Backstage instance might look like. Because right now a lot of the instances are private to companies, and so if someone is looking for like what is a Backstage instance that's like being used actively, what does that actually look like? It's hard to get that idea. So once you see something like that already exists, and it sounds like the answer is kind of, but not really, because the Cradio platform IO one has just sample data. So we're going to open source ours, and so people can look at that and see, like, pull requests and see like what actual development around Backstage, a live Backstage instance might look like, just for those who are interested in seeing a point of reference for a production instance Backstage.
Wow, what a great initiative.
So
Indeed.
Stay tuned. We'll write a blog post in the near future about what we've stood up and where the people can find it.
That's really good. I think the demo site was created just for that, like just to see code samples and configs and Heroku deployment files and Docker files, things that actually work in life. So it'd be cool to see that. Thanks for all your hard work on that.
Cool, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
It's awesome. Worth mentioning as well is like if you have a plugin or something that you would like to add on the demo site, that's fully possible as well. If you want to make that better, like features or pull requests to that repository is more than welcome. All of that is open source as well under Backstage/demo, if anyone is interested.
Link is in the chat.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Johan. So we have no extra questions on the agenda issue and on Zoom. So if you'd like to discuss something impromptu, or if you have something burning in your mind, or if you hear about something like ingestions or anything, just feel free to unmute yourself and start a conversation.
If there's no questions, I can always ask questions. I always have questions. So I was curious, like, how well known is the fact that, like, my understanding of Backstage is that the plugins provide a client API for talking to the REST service that the Backstage plugin provides, and the front end that talks to that API, right? So there's like, each plugin has like two parts. There's like the front end part, and then there's a back end part. And the back end part has the RESTful service, and it has an API that is that the front end consumes to talk to the RESTful service in the back end. I'm curious, like, how well known is that, like, amongst the people who are creating plugins? Is that pattern pretty well followed? Like, is that pattern being used within companies? Like, because I know a lot of companies are creating plugins as part of their process. Like, are teams using that process, are using that interface? Like, I'm really curious to learn about the experience that people have with that particular API.
I'd say the things that I found in conversations with different Backstage adopters is that the three most common types of plugins there are three most common types of plugins. The one with the front end and back end, as you said. The second with just the front end. And that's also interesting that a lot of plugins don't even need a back end. So why create one just for something you can do in the front end? And the third one is that you already have a backend that exists somewhere. You already had a service that you created internally, and you just need to hook that up into Backstage. So you create a front-end plugin, and then you use the proxy backend to just allow connections to your existing services. So that's the three main types. And I do feel like it's well known, but I don't even know what that even means.
I'm thinking that if somebody wanted to, I recently we wrote a blog post about how to use your own component system with Backstage Backstage backend. So if you wanted to use, like, if your company, if you have your own component system at your company and you cannot use like Material UI and you want to start from scratch, effectively, you would essentially need to be rebuilding all of the front end from scratch, you know. And in the blog post we talk about, like, we don't recommend it because it's, you know, you're giving up a lot of stuff. But and then so we describe like how you connect to how you use the API that's provided by the plugin. And I think that's a really powerful feature, and I think it's really good for people to know. Because I think a lot of people kind of skip, so like people, if they have to do from scratch, they kind of skip the part of using the Backstage APIs, and they really go from scratch. And that's the part I was curious if, for those who have done completely from scratch, or other, like, how many teams have gone completely from scratch, like they have completely separate front end. I know one of our clients is. I'm curious if there are others who have done that. If you've seen that happen. Sounds like probably not many.
I guess it's that okay. It's pretty uncommon, but I mean, there's so many out there. I haven't talked to even a fraction of them probably. And like you say, the threshold is going to be fairly, you know, cumbersome for most. The front end does offer a very large amount of functionality as well, a platform to build upon. So yeah, it might be a viable path. And indeed, stuff like the catalog, some of the services are perfectly, you know, standalone systems in and of themselves, and can be used in isolation. But for Backstage, the ecosystem, I think that front end is a fairly large part of it. It's probably fairly uncommon, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely don't recommend it. But in the case of like with that particular client, they had it's really a publishing site. Like, you could essentially implement the whole catalog in its current state. You could implement that as like a Next.js site, or just like, oh, like it's like it'd be more like, so it would be conceptually a replacement stuff like Drupal. You know, they have like a bunch of content. So that's their starting point. And so it's really the use case, it was really like the focus was really on aligning the UI with their internal corporate UI more than using the functionality. Like, a lot of the functionality that Backstage provides, it seemed from the beginning, at least, kind of the UI seemed kind of divergent from the UI that they wanted. So they essentially needed like something that they could start with, essentially the clean slate. And so I think and it might be like, I also saw somebody in chat mention that that like, what if we wanted to have a public version of Backstage that is just like a subsection of the catalog, but you're publishing just a specific section of the catalog, and you want to make that information available. It's more like API documentation publishing, as opposed to a searchable catalog that developers go to like, you know, find all their services. So it's kind of a different way, like a different lens on the same data. And it seems like that could be like that's a specific use case. I think it might not be common at the current stage, but it might be something that like a small population of companies might find that useful, but as the population grows, that percentage gets more and more people. So it's just something that I noticed. So I was curious, like how common it is, but it sounds like, yeah, it makes sense that there's a lot of people are leveraging the full UI, and I think that's the best case scenario for Backstage, is to use as much of it as possible.
Sorry, Taras, just to share, talking with many prospects and people interested in Backstage, I can tell you that I'm aware at least of 2 or 3 that are interested in this. And honestly, a couple of them already asked me if there is a group of people, someone interested in contributing that use case. So it is not uncommon. I think that I don't know in your experience if you heard about one only or a few or some, but I have in mind a couple, at least 3 companies.
I'm aware of 2.
So it probably is not so rare.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like it's even natural that it would happen eventually. Like I'm thinking of things like Google Cloud or AWS and how they have really cool CLIs, and you can do pretty much everything with CLI and not have to visit the front end. Even Backstage has a CLI, and every cool platform has a CLI. And what if you're able to do stuff with Backstage CLI, like create stuff and view stuff, and with that you can automate things just by using CLI commands.
But the use case that I hear, and maybe it's a different use case and I misunderstand, but it's part of the conversation, of course. The use case that I hear is more about, I have my internal technical documentation, I have my internal software catalog, and I would like to enable some external people, that could be customers, could be partners, could be the developer ecosystem, to view and consume a subset of my content, again, the technical documentation or the catalog, in a controlled way, in some cases also providing a sort of a token and key to consume the API in my area and recognize them and things like that. So it is about exposing a subset of the documentation and catalog to third-party and external people in a controlled way. Is it your use case as well, Taras, or it's different use case?
Yeah, it is the use case. The 2 cases that I'm thinking of, they're the use case that you're describing, Cisco. So, yeah. But Himanshu, I actually, what you're describing, I can also see value in that as well from a different perspective, from a developer perspective, because we actually implemented what you're describing, Himanshu. We made a REPL for Backstage that we use internally. So so we can look for, and I mean, that's something you probably could contribute to the Backstage CLI itself. So you can actually, you could do things like look up entities and stuff without having to go. You could do that through a command line. We created that for one of our projects. So maybe that's something to contribute upstream.
REPL for Backstage, at least do a demo. Just excite us before, and then
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe next contributor day we could do a demo of that REPL.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I don't know, Glo, if you want to jump in and maybe share a little bit more about the context and maybe the use case that you have. Sorry, if you prefer to skip, but it would be nice to hear from you.
I'm listening to this, and with the new permissions framework that's available now, we're exploring some of these things as options. I don't want to say anything because there are political, implications within the org. But we have a case where we have an external developer portal, and we're trying to solve some existential angst around what is internal and what is external. And it would be very interesting to explore, yes, here at the Acme Corporation, what the possibilities might be for serving everything out of a single pane of glass rather than trying to maintain pipelines to two different places. So that is very interesting, but yeah, still in the ideation phase of this.
So do you know what I can? So thank you, Acme representative, for your contribution. But what I think it's interesting here is that I feel like there is interest on having a common conversation about a possible solution to, explore this as part of the Backstage open source project. So something that your Acme can benefit, but also other can benefit, and could maybe contribute to solve one common problem. It sounds like an interesting topic for a group in conversation. Yep, thank you for sharing. I don't know if we could, I would like to create this safe place, first of all, where to discuss all of this. I don't know exactly how, but we are working on it, but not there yet. Thank you for sharing.
Awesome. Thank you for taking my question.
All good, all good. We do have a question in chat from Satish. I want to talk about any target date for Backstage 1.0. What's Backstage 1.0? Who should I throw this to?
Who wants to take that?
I thought you were going to take that.
You were volunteering yourself, Francesco.
Yes, exactly. I'm the shy one, so no, I don't want to steal this. Of course, also to the maintainers, because they are working on that. I'm talking about that, but they are working on that. So first of all, yes, there is Backstage 1.0 coming. I think that Himanshu raised a good question, but it could be an interesting conversation to have. What do you expect to be the 1.0 version? This is more of a quiz that, of course, I won't raise here. But 1.0 for us, it's a very relevant milestone, and not only for us, because we are hearing clearly from the market this is really needed. Exactly, Julio is raising the right question. So the birthday of Backstage, not Spotify, but Backstage as open source product is the 16th of March. And we would like to share a gift to the community. Well, yes, you can unmute yourself and say hello and show your face, because we would like to know you, Julio. This is the prize. No, we don't send goats, so we can introduce you to goats. We have some goats here in the call. Anyway, so 1.0, it's really a milestone to claim. Let me say claim the maturity of the platform, something that is still there because we have hundreds of adopters. We don't plan to have major features released as part of the 1.0 version. It will be more a sort of, from a feature perspective, what you know today and what you have today. It will be more putting a line on the sand to say, hey guys, we reached a milestone, something that is, we can say it's mature enough and adoptable already, of course, and then we will continue to iterate and improve this. In terms of timeline, you should expect news in weeks. So we would like to do a sort of surprise, but again, the target line is around the birthday date, and the team is working heavily to make it happening, and they are very, very close in shipping the support policy, a 1.0 version with new naming and packaging across the overall packages and technical libraries, removing all the deprecated source code as much and features as much as we can. So there is a lot of work behind, but it's a great announcement and achievement. And honestly, I don't know if it's clear, but you are part of that celebration that we would like to have, because the contribution to this is incredible, and so we would like to celebrate all together. Let me know if you have any specific need. I'm happy to address this together with the team.
I have a quick one, Francesco, I think you can address. So does 1.0 have a name like pineapple or
pineapple is the most well, probably not. Probably not, but anyway, we plan to do a sort of communication to clarify what Backstage 1.0 is. Honestly, I have to say that this is less for the experts, because I feel like you know Backstage very well. And honestly, when I talk to adopters, many adopters are already confident. One is suggesting goats. Is confident about the stability and the maturity of the platform, but we want to be clear also with the less confident and technical people, and this is why we are deciding to ship exactly accordingly with the birthday, because of course it's also the time to claim this 1.0 version, because I mean, having hundreds of structured company adopting this is not a minor milestone. Anyway, more information will come soon with blog post and announcement. Again, we would like also to celebrate in person, but something that is pretty hard for the moment, but something that we have in our radar. Stay tuned.
Well, that's amazing. Thanks, Francesco, for sharing. Thanks, everyone, for all your questions. This is the end. I do have 2 call to actions at the end. So the first one is that if you're a Backstage adopter, you might, oh, sorry, I posted the link for the second one. But there is an unconference happening on March 3rd by Rudy and Frontside. Please join, just interact, just like here. I hope it's going to be fun. And the second one is that if you're an adopter, you probably know about this link, adopters.md file. Please feel free to add yourself in here. This is a small contribution which has a big impact. It really helps the project gain momentum and credibility. And with that, have a lovely evening or the rest of your day, wherever you are in the world. Thanks again for joining. See you next month. Bye.